Ever since the multiplayer beta update released on Steam, PvP battles finally became available, and, well, I'm not very good at it. PvP in Cassette Beasts is mostly community driven since there isn't an official ladder or anything, so what constitutes as a standard rule set is decided upon by the community. We're still figuring out the best way to shape the competitive experience, so while the rules can change between tournaments and even depends on who organizes it, we normally played with the following settings. Level 200 since there's a max level, plus it gives the highest overall bulk and thus the lowest percent health lost. All characters will temporarily be set to level 200, so you can still play even if you haven't reached max level yet. Fusing with fusion power enabled. Fusion related upgrades are disabled, so fusing becomes a late game comeback option. Attributes and duplicate stickers are disabled, so it is just grind to win or heavily luck dependent, and some rare attributes are too good to be deemed balanced in competitive play. Removing duplicate stickers also adds a team building restriction, which I think makes it more interesting than your average random starter spam. Regardless of what settings you play, in PvP, gym points don't matter and are reset to default. Bootlegs are allowed, you can't use duplicate species, and there are some other extra rules which we'll get into later. Alright, back to the story. Multiplayer has been out a couple months ago since recording, but people have been theorizing about PvP long before the trailer even dropped. Even in the earliest days of PvP, you can already see teams with clear thought put into them. Compared to these people spearheading the meta, I didn't know what I was doing. Despite this, I started putting together a few teams to see how well they would work out. With a few matches I've had with these rules, what I've gathered is that I really didn't know what I was doing. And before you know it, I ended up joining a tournament hosted by Amaisora, which took place on the 27th of May. It was closed team sheets, best of 3, and during tournament day there were only 2 of us participating, so I just had to play one set against Sora. I decided to bring the following team. It's not my finest work, and it's quite gimmicky, but the idea is I lead with Zoo Strike and Pinbolt. On turn 1, Zoo Strike goes for New Leaf to remove my opponent's statuses, and Pinbolt uses Deep Freeze to lock the opponent from switching. Then I swap into Hedgehorn with this Hot Potato set. Preemptive Strike ensures that even if the opponent has Machine Curse, I will still pass it to them. And then on that turn I use Avalanche to prevent them from passing it back. And who would have guessed? I lost. Pretty badly. I lost twice, ending up finishing second place in a tournament with 2 participants. At this point, I still haven't won a single PvP match with standard rule sets. 2 months later, Zero the Fox, who runs an unofficial PvP server, hosted her first ever tournament. This time, it's a best of 5 open team sheet format where you could see your opponent's tapes, sticker loadout, and partner choice prior to the match. We'll be playing round robin, and the top 4 would advance to a single elimination bracket. Since this tournament is the main point of the video, I suppose now would be the best time to talk about additional rules. Gambit had to go because it offers an insane stat boost. It doubles both offense, defense, speed, and even accuracy. Due to how accuracy works in Cassette Beasts, this effectively resulted in a flat 100% increase in accuracy. So even strong but highly inaccurate moves like Stab in the Dark will land reliably. Characters taking overspill damage meant that it would completely warp the game around it.
Sorry.
Some known exploits also had to go, such as using any passive move using move and dual wield. For example, Custom Starter into Dual Wield Taunt allows you to apply Berserk to your opponents before they even get a chance to choose a move. Being able to bypass Machine Curse through Dual Wield immediately becomes a problem because all of a sudden you can attack or apply debuffs to your opponent before the first turn even begins. Stickers with a compatible with any tape attribute were also banned due to an exploit present in PvP where even if attributes are disabled, such moves would not be removed from the tape. Finally, any starter move calling Change the Record was banned as well due to its potential for looping thanks to Machine Curse. With that out of the way, leading up to the tournament, I did some sparring matches versus Dystopian Teddy Bear. I wanted to have some practice with an open team sheet format, and while I was aware that the teams we used then would be different come tournament time, I felt it was good practice nonetheless to scout out the state of the metagame. I brought the same team from Sora's tournament, and DTB brought a team of strong staple mons that ended up being a good snapshot of how far behind I am when it comes to team building. It was supposed to be a best of 5 match, but I lost 3 times in a row. Despite my immaculate losing streak, I had to trudge on and go back to the drawing board, but this time I now have a direction of how I want to do it. It would be a mistake to not use some of the best mons in the meta, because they're good for a reason, but I also want to add in some ingredients that no one would expect. By bringing something unconventional, I can take advantage of the fact that my opponents don't already know the best game plan against an underrated pick. With that in mind, going into this tournament, I expected Umbrella to be a staple thanks to its signature move Bad Forecast. Bad Forecast automatically applies Evasion Nullified to the opponent, much like Echolocation or Magnet, and is not affected by Machine Curse. Evasion Null is one of the most powerful debuffs in the game. If you're not familiar with it, Evasion Null lowers the evasion to 1%, so most attacks will land on them. On top of that, this also affects the critical hit chance to the point where any move with at least 16% accuracy will always crit on a target with Evasion Null. This is basically a free 50% damage boost to most of your attacks, and on top of that, you can reliably get extra AP using critical AP since you're almost always going to crit, and even making Critical Mass, a normally unreliable passive due to needing crits to activate, extremely valuable. Sure, Bad Forecast only has 50% accuracy, but through focus, accuracy up will ensure that it will land. This is why most Umbrella sets will feature Echolocation, CS Focus, and Bad Forecast to apply Evasion Null on both opponents basically for free. Adding in Preemptive Strike and Critical AP means that Umbrella will immediately get 2 extra AP to fire off a strong Butterfly effect, whose damage scales with the user's current AP, or switch into something that can utilize that extra AP effectively. Obviously, I had to bring Umbrella to the tournament since you can't go wrong with using one of the best support mons in the format. Because Umbrella is one of the slowest mons in the game, one way to use it is to pivot it in, immediately debuff the opponent, and then switch it out for next turn. By running the aforementioned set, this only leaves me with 2 extra slots. I decided to go for a Glass Bootleg to deal with lightning types and immediately give them unit target. I eventually settled on Thunder Blast. The air type damage follow-up improves my matchup against glass and plant types, though in hindsight I should have used Glass Cannon instead. I lastly ran Machine Curse for my final slot since I had to put at least one somewhere on the team, and putting it on a support mon seemed sensible to me. Now, one of the best ways to control the storm that is Umbrella is to run Pylangolin, who can use CS Fair Fight to block Evasion Nullified. Because Umbrella is very slow compared to Pylangolin, it will be able to set up Fair Fight and block any new statuses including Evasion Null from Bad Forecast. You would typically use something like New Leaf to get rid of Fair Fight among other status effects, but I also wanted to have more flexibility and not be predictable with those matchups. From my preliminary research, it looked like Plant was the most common bootleg for it, since it gives Pylangolin access to New Leaf and possibly Snooze Spore to put you to sleep if CS Fair Fight doesn't activate or if they predict the New Leaf. So I had to account for plant type counters when team building. My first option for dealing with Fair Fight is having a fast New Leaf user. I previously used a Plant Zoo Strike for Sora's tournament, but that set was just bad. As a fast support beast, Zoo Strike fits what I need since it has 200 speed. Pylangolin has 160 speed, but effectively bumps up to about 192 speed when used by Barkley, so even something fast like Pinball could get outsped if it's on the wrong character. But Zoo Strike doesn't have to worry about that. Echolocation, AP Starter, and New Leaf were mandatory to deal with Fair Fight on turn 1. Zoo Strike has terrible offensive stats, so my only real damaging option is Icicle Dart. To boost its damage output and get some speed control from my other tapes, I ran CS Sprint on it. I added in Avalanche for protection against melee attacks, and Unicast to dampen the opponent's targeting and try to force them to use New Leaf on themselves. My other options were using attacks that have a type advantage over Plant. Even though the debuffs won't matter due to Fair Fight, type advantage attacks deal 30% more damage, which is quite valuable. I also wanted to have a Mind Meld user or two on the team, and preferably Preemptive Strike so I can get some early chip damage. Mind Meld is just generally a good buff since you can basically have 2 CS moves on switching, you can share passives, and even have 2 of them to have a better chance of activating, and so on. I want this on a bulky support role so that I can both repeatedly switch into it for chip damage and rely on it to tank a few hits. The best option here would have been an Air Mascotorn, who is quite tanky and has a monstrous 200 melee attack. I went with Air Grampus, who has a much worse offensive profile, but it gets echolocation and is faster than Mascotorn, so that's good enough for me. As for its moveset, I learned the hard way that your tape should be able to function outside of Mind Melt or Berserk, so I gave it the old one too, which is just one of the best melee attacks for its price. Fog is an unusual tech I picked to counter Rapid Fire. It's a powerful priority move that Trifinx and regular Kepri can use and could easily delete Zeus Strike. Fog sets up, Fog, which can drop Rapid Fire's accuracy to 0% since it's not water, ice, or air. It's not a perfect solution since an accuracy boost combined with evasional on the opponent will still cause the move to land, but it would at least buy me some time to get rid of these Rapid Fire users. AP Steal is there to Mind Meld it away or to deny slower users from attacking. AP Refund is also there to support its allies to Mind Meld, as with 2 AP Refunds there's a 36% chance for at least 1 to activate compared to having only 1 at 20%. I still wanted one more tanky Mind Meld support, so I went with Ouroboros. Stat-wise, it's one of the best tanks when it comes to range attacks. Plus it speed ties with Palangolin, so if I have host advantage, I can set up Mind Meld before fair fight and act before it. Oh yeah, host advantage is a thing. I should probably talk about that quickly. Whenever there's a speed tie, instead of being random, they're always resolved in order, favoring the host who sent the battle request. It always follows the host player, host partner, then the other player, and finally the other partner. Switching is not handled based on speed, but by what I call the index order, which means the host always gets to switch their tapes out first. Anyway, I added in Thunder Blast since the air attack part gets a 20% boost for being the same type as Ouroboros. It also happens to have access to New Leaf, and I needed an extra user anyway. Taunt is there so I can shut down Palangolin after Zeus Strike uses New Leaf on it. I still had one more space for a passive, and I was torn between Breathing Technique or Insomnia. But I went with Insomnia since this team should be able to function under Berserk anyway, while Sleep can be debilitating. And AP Refund is there to take advantage of Mind Meld. At this point, I need some serious damage on my own. While team building, I originally wanted to try out Plant Arcade so I can always use New Leaf first. Since New Leaf is unavoidable, I could even use Frozen Ground to get double speed since now the accuracy debuff doesn't matter. I felt it was too inflexible and predictable, they can anticipate me using New Leaf on the first turn and outplay me that way. But then I remembered, didn't this thing 2-shot most things in the game already? Icicle Dart from an Ice Bootleg Arcade, after a speed up from Sprint, can just annihilate its opponents. Arcade has awful defensive stats, so I had to be careful with my positioning and most likely preserve it for the late game cleanup. Knowing this, I added in Dual Wield for Icicle Dart so that I can deal massive damage if I preserve it well in the endgame. Echolocation is a no-brainer, and I had critical AP and AP Refund on it so that I can continuously go for Dual Wield Icicle Dart. I also gave it Unicast in case I needed to do some disruption. The Fog and Grampus's toolkit synergizes with Arcade really well, since otherwise it just melts to Rapid Fire. I can switch into some very bulky air types so I can take it for breakfast and even get a free wall, so I can more effectively reposition the Arcade. I still needed a strong melee attacker to round out this balanced team. I originally wanted to use Plastic Mismimic for echolocation and its insane melee attack, but it's in range to get one-shot by Rapid Fire Kepri. After some preemptive chip, Rapid Fire Trifinx can also take it down no problem. To fix this, I went with something very unconventional, Plastic Liligator. I feel like Liligator is an underrated pick since it's overshadowed by the faster Riptara and Parashare, the more powerful Mismimic, or the tankier Mascotorn. But since the Gator can live a hit from unboosted rapid fire Kepri or a boosted rapid fire Tarkings, and it can outspeed a lot of things with speed control from Zeus Strike or Arcade, I decided to go all in on the Gator. Lilligator always gets New Leaf, but I ditched it for Life Absorb, thinking it would at least give some healing when fused. I went with CS Sharpen and Preemptive Strike to deal big damage upon switch-in, along with the old one too. I also gave it Pyre Stance so I can deal with faster melee attackers like Cryptera or Cryosure. Since much of Lilligator's bulk is in max HP and not melee defense, the reflected damage from Pyre Stance will be much stronger. AP Refund is there so I can keep using the old one too, and I also slotted in Machine Curse for the sake of it, though little did I know this would be the most impactful decision I ever made. My partner of choice would be the good boy Barkley. The speed he offered was crucial when dealing with Palangolin teams, and in case I had to deal with a fast Palangolin lead, I could at least match it with Ouroboros. Plus it boosted the power of Icicle Dart for Zeus Strike and Arcade, and give Lilligator that extra bit to outspeed even unboosted Arcade after speed up. And here it is, the full team I brought for the tournament. The numbers just indicate which era of multiplayer I first planned on using them, with 0 during the early multiplayer beta days, 1 for Sora's tournament, and 2 for this one. The tournament was planned to start on the 20th of July, 12 PM Central Standard Time. Most of the participants are in the US or Europe, while I live on the other side of the world, so I was already in bed when the tournament started. As a result, my first match didn't take place until about 9 or 10 hours later. Some of them were already heading to bed long before I woke up, so I just battled whoever was available. While waiting for someone to battle, Resident Eugene enthusiast That1 Snake wanted to do some battling in the meantime. She wasn't even part of the tournament, so I thought this would be good practice going in. We did 2 matches. I lost both of them. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that at the time, I have been playing this game semi-consistently for over a year now. While it's understandable to not be good at the game when you're still new, I'm basically a fossil compared to most other competitors. It's just hard not to compare myself to others, to lose confidence in my abilities as a player. It just sickened me to think that I spent all this time preparing, meticulously studying the meta, and preparing my damage calcs, only for me to just flop in the tournament. After all, if history and statistics is to say anything, there's no reason for this trend to suddenly break, right? Now for the main event. I won't be discussing them in detail since I've already spent way too much time on this video, plus you can watch the full matches on this channel. But I want to go over some general strategies for some of these matches. My first match was with Zero. She's an avid AP Factory user, which is on the Galagar and Queenix. Since her team features Fair Fight Palangolin, I have to deal with it one way or another, either by immediately using New Leaf to get rid of it, or by overwhelming the enemy with immediate damage from Zeus Strike and Arcade using Icicle Dart. Kepri's effectiveness is hampered with Preemptive Strike on Grampus and having air types in general to tank rapid fire. For round 2, I faced off against Black, a very creative team builder. I was expecting a conductive build, which I lost to some time ago, but Artilleryx and Pixie weren't what I expected. This team leaned quite heavily into range attacks, but fortunately, I had an answer in the form of Fog. Erratum Totem brought a full Astral team, which remarkably isn't the only monotype team in the tournament. However, this team lacked any priority moves or fair fight, so it doesn't have an answer to Arcade's absurd damage output, in conjunction with bad forecast. Erika's team was quite threatening, since she has fair fight to slow down the pace of the game, but if you try to get rid of it through New Leaf, or if she doesn't lead with Palangolin, you're going to get put to sleep by Snooze Spore or Hypnotize. I did have Insomnia on Ouroboros, but honestly I was saved by Preemptive Strike not being removed when asleep due to it being a passive. Before our match, both DTB and I were undefeated at this point. This team was terrifying to deal with for three main reasons. First, this arcade is faster than mine thanks to Frozen Ground. I don't have Fair Fight to block the Umbrellas' bad forecast, so if I don't find a way to an arcade with doubled speed, it's just lights out for me. Second, Erratum has Fission Power and Vengeful Curse, so worst case scenario I'm up against 3 mons who each have 2 copies of Vengeful Curse. Flinch and Sleep are some of the worst debuffs you can get, Petrified and Berserker are also terrible, and even though there are 22 status effects you can choose from, each KO will have 6 chances to instantly ruin my positioning. Lastly, this Galagor had Critical Mass Headshot. If this Galagor ever gets an opening, it's impossible to survive a Critical Mass loop. I only have Machine Curse on Liligator and Umbrella, so I'm basically screwed if I don't preserve both of them. My only way out is to have either Gator or Umbrella in the field at all times, and constantly switch if necessary to take out the arcade with priority. Hazel's team also featured a Pixie, which is quite amusing that there are 2 of them in the tournament. Both Avalanche on Umbrella and Dual Will Jumpscare on Rosewood are quite problematic, but since I see no priority moves or fair fight on her team, Arcade is free to click the delete button. Now I have a terrible matchup against Sora's team given my very limited options for counterplay. Getting 4 preemptive strikes per switch-in thanks to multi-strike and mind meld is going to be a massive problem, especially when I don't have a wall setter and I have to somehow shrug off heavy hits from Mascotorn and Anatoma, who both have a type advantage on my bulky air types. I also can't properly reposition my arcade without it just exploding from preemptive strikes, so I'm effectively down to only 5 tapes. Murph brought a Haunt team. I did not bring Phase Ship because I did not expect someone to bring a Haunt team. You can already tell how poorly this will go for me. After surviving a grueling 8 rounds, I somehow only lost 1 set. I didn't even think I'd make it this far, given I haven't done well in PvP prior to this tournament. But I'm now in the top cut along with DTB, Artem, and Sora. When the bracket was announced, I think an Umbrella stopped by in real life since the weather was really bad that day, to the point where my internet was down for the entire time. The next day it looked like Artem and Sora backed out, so apparently I'm in the finals now versus DTB. I did not see myself winning the finals at all. Fallout the Galagor is always a looming threat, so while DTB can adapt more freely, I am forced to do the same strategy as before of having a Machine Curse tape in the field at all times, and constantly repositioning until the land is free from famine. But I've already made it this far, I'm not backing down without putting up a fight. I did it! I somehow clutched up and ended up being the server's first tournament winner. To the unsuspecting observer, it looks like I'm just good at this game, but the truth is, I genuinely did not believe that I would even get a win. Behind this success was a grueling gauntlet of losses, to the point where I almost dropped the scene entirely. But I didn't. And so this is the tale of how I somehow won a tournament. I know this video covers a lot, but to me, it's important to document the history of this rather small community, to tell a story that has a lot of personal meaning, and to make it clear that no, I am not the best player in the world. In fact, I'm kind of mid to be honest. After that tournament, there were discussions to ban a couple more things. Bad Forecast was one of the main ones that got banned moving forward. Taunt, sleep moves, and petrification via Stony Look also eventually got the ban hammer, as did Preemptive Strike. We also moved from a best of 5 format down to best of 3, partially due to time constraints present in an online format, and partially due to how long matches can take and how draining it can be to sit through a whole set on a round-robin format where you battle everyone. Zoo Strike stocks also skyrocketed for the next tournament, though, granted, the most common variant was Poison and not Plant. The combat in Cassette Beasts is very rich and complex, and the PvP scene is still at its infancy. If you've been a part of this community, thank you for your support and for being a part of this journey. And if you've been thinking of trying out PvP but haven't yet, please do so. Expand your horizons, find a new way to experience the game. Hello, this is the end of the video. I've spent about 100 hours producing and editing this, so if you made it this far, I would appreciate if you do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, give your feedback down in the comments. Or don't, I can't promise a consistent upload schedule or a consistent production quality anyway.